Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because we are taking a fascinating and, honestly, an incredibly important zoom out journey. Just think about your daily routine for a second. Whether you're walking through a college campus, grabbing something at a local convenience store, or just glancing around the desks at your own office, energy drinks are absolutely everywhere. I mean, we hardly even register them as stimulants anymore, do we? We just call them gamer fuel or a study aid. They're heavily marketed as this ultimate quick fix for fatigue, a magic bullet for focus, and just a total staple for pushing through a sluggish afternoon. But what is actually happening beneath the surface? Today, we are going to use the data to strip away all that marketing and look at the real, measurable impacts these beverages are having on our bodies and our minds. We'll start by looking at one extreme, microscopic study, and then we're going to zoom all the way out to some massive population-level behavioral studies. All right, let's dive right in. Just picture this number for a second. 254 over 150 millimeters of mercury. Now, if you are at all familiar with blood pressure readings, your jaw probably just hit the floor. A normal, healthy reading is typically hovering right around 120 over 80. Well, this shockingly high reading belonged to a man in his 50s when he was admitted to a hospital in Nottingham, England. He was experiencing a severe medical emergency. He was having a stroke, and when doctors initially assessed him, they were totally baffled. I mean, he was fit, he was active, and he absolutely did not fit the typical profile for experiencing such an extreme cardiovascular event. So, what triggered it? Well, upon further investigation, the doctors discovered the root cause behind this massive spike in blood pressure. The patient had developed a habit of consuming an average of 8 energy drinks every single day. That equates to a staggering 1,200 milligrams of caffeine daily. Just to put that into perspective, the recommended daily maximum for a totally healthy adult is just 400 milligrams. He was consuming 3 times the safe limit. And actually, it wasn't just the caffeine. He was flooding his system with other stimulating compounds and just immense levels of sugar. And this isn't just about abstract medical numbers. It's about real, tangible human consequences. The patient actually spoke anonymously to the BMJ case reports, and he shared this pretty devastating reality. He said, "I obviously wasn't aware of the dangers drinking energy drinks were causing to myself. I have been left with numbness in my left side hand and fingers, foot and toes, even after 8 years." It is a really solemn reminder that the stakes of overconsumption are incredibly severe, because even after he completely gave up the drinks and saw his blood pressure finally normalize, the neurological damage from that stroke was irreversible. It really heavily grounds our data in a harsh human reality. Section 1. The physical toll, from heart to mouth. So stepping back from that extreme singular case, what actually happens to our cardiovascular system in controlled clinical studies? Like, what is physically going on inside us when we casually drink these things? In a study by Nowak and colleagues, researchers took 2 groups of young adults and gave them different drink interventions. One group got organic noni and chokeberry juices, and the other got standard off-the-shelf energy drinks. The results were night and day. The organic juice group experienced this nice, calming effect on their cardiovascular system, lowered heart rates, and the lowest diastolic and systolic blood pressure. Conversely, the energy drink group experienced the exact opposite. Their heart rates increased and their blood pressure spiked. The energy drinks literally created tension inside their blood vessels. And over time, that kind of continuous vessel tension, it can lead to serious disorders like hypertension and arrhythmia. But the physical toll doesn't stop at the heart, right? It actually starts the second you take a sip, right in your mouth. I want to walk you through this really fascinating dental experiment by Pretha and Prabhakar. They were looking at the pH of saliva, which is absolutely crucial because normal saliva is what protects your teeth. They ran a trial exposing groups to different liquids. First up was mineral water, which predictably increased and improved salivary pH. Cool. Then they tried a carbonated soda, Pepsi, which dropped the pH and created an acidic environment for about 15 minutes before normalizing. But then came Monster Energy. This resulted in the lowest overall pH out of all the groups tested. The combo of the extremely low pH and high sugar creates a highly acidic oral environment. And that doesn't just leave a sour taste. It actively strips away your tooth enamel, leading to severe dental erosion and hypersensitivity. So the tangible physical damage to the heart and the teeth is pretty undeniable. But that brings us to a fascinating and slightly more complex question. Are energy drinks actively causing negative behaviors in young people, or are they just predicting them? Section 2. Mental and behavioral risks in youth. To figure that out, we have to pivot to a macroscopic view. We're looking at population-level behavioral studies, specifically this massive longitudinal study of Swedish adolescents in grades 6 through 9. They tracked these students over time to see how their habits related to their overall well-being and social integration. The researchers were looking at what they called norm-breaking behaviors, and the findings were honestly quite surprising. It turns out consuming energy drinks wasn't just some isolated dietary choice. It was heavily associated with a whole cluster of norm-breaking activities. Adolescents who frequently consumed them were significantly more likely to engage in general truancy from school, gaming-related truancy, which means staying home specifically just to play video games, tobacco use, early alcohol consumption, and even just skipping breakfast on school days. It became super clear that energy drink consumption is deeply entangled with a much broader pattern of risk-taking and rule-breaking. But here's where the timeline of the data gets truly compelling. Because this was a longitudinal study, researchers could map out exactly how these behaviors evolved over time. They found that energy drink consumption actually acted as a massive red flag. It was highly predictive of worse mental health and risk behaviors a full year later. If an adolescent was drinking energy drinks at the start of the study, they had a noticeably increased risk of developing school-related stress, experiencing insufficient sleep, and, shockingly, engaging in deliberate self-harm by the very next year. So it wasn't just that stressed kids were simply reaching for energy drinks to cope, it was that energy drink consumption happened prior to and directly predicted these severe emotional and behavioral problems down the line. So why is this happening? A massive piece of the puzzle lies in sleep. Specifically, this concept called shut-eye latency. That's the amount of time it takes you to transition from being fully awake to actually falling asleep. Energy drinks, as we know, contain huge hits of caffeine, and caffeine is a stimulant that actively inhibits sleep-promoting adenosine in your brain. This significantly lengthens shut-eye latency. Basically, these adolescents simply cannot fall asleep. And this failure to get sufficient sleep, that directly mediates the exact emotional and behavioral problems we just talked about. The anxiety, the stress, the depression, the norm-breaking, so much of it is being fueled by the sheer chronic exhaustion caused by these beverages. Section 3. The call for regulation. All right, so we've seen the devastating individual case, the clinical data on the heart and teeth, and the broader population-level behavioral risks. So what did doctors, researchers, and public health experts actually want us to do about this hidden household issue? Because the medical community is raising a massive red flag right now. It's captured perfectly in this quote from the BMJ case reports. There's regular publicity about health effects of alcohol and smoking, but little about the increasingly prevalent modifiable lifestyle trend of energy drink consumption. The main concern here is that while we heavily broadcast the dangers of traditional vices, energy drinks, which remember, contain highly potent pharmacologically active stimulants, are slipping completely under the radar. I mean, they're sitting right there in the grocery store aisle next to the apple juice. Because of this, researchers are proposing 3 really clear societal interventions to protect cardiovascular, cerebrovascular, and mental health. First up, tighter regulation of sales and advertising. Let's be real, these drinks are often aggressively and specifically marketed to the exact youth populations that are most at risk. Second, instituting age limits. Researchers note that energy drinks are often used as a pause drink or a gateway substance, basically a thrill-seeking behavior used when alcohol isn't available. And when you really think about it, it's kind of ironic, right? You need to be 18 to buy a lottery ticket, but literally any 12-year-old can walk in and buy a drink that mimics mild hypertension. An age limit sends a clear societal message that these are simply not for children. And third, mandatory transparency in ingredient labeling, so consumers actually know exactly how much caffeine and sugar they're ingesting compared to just a standard cup of coffee. Which leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought to consider today. If we regulate alcohol and tobacco because of their physical and behavioral impacts on society, should energy drinks be next? The data clearly shows they are not just harmless sodas. They have real, measurable, and sometimes very severe impacts on our hearts, our teeth, our sleep, and the behavioral development of our youth. I really hope this explainer has given you a clearer, more structured understanding of the actual science behind the buzz. Take a look at your own habits, consider the accessibility of these drinks in your community, and keep asking the right questions. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll see you next time.